Hey, Warpugs. So, this is a request from the Patreon listings, and this is a request from Real Gamers, MMBR, and this is on the NX-REFIT from the Enterprise series for Star Trek. Now, if I'm right about this, this comes right after the Xindi attack on Earth. Um, with the Xindi attack came a lot of issues. Namely, the Enterprise was recalled directly back to Earth. Um, not a big surprise there. Earth had been attacked. A lot of people were dead. I'm thinking that this is what. It's been a while since I watched Enterprise, but I'm thinking that this is what happened as far as that went. The NX class, which the Enterprise was they took all the refit suggestions that the crew and the captain made and forged them into what became the Columbia. So essentially what wound up happening was the NX-01 went out into deep space and they encountered situation after situation, discovered that the universe wasn't exactly polite and wasn't exactly there for, to be friends with everybody. Now, I only had one real gripe about, two technically. I only had two real gripes about the Enterprise series. It is one of my favorite as far as Trek series goes, but my biggest gripe with it was, one, Scott Bakula as the captain. I did not really like. That's neither here nor there. And the second was how it ended. I hated the way the Enterprise ended. Like, I didn't need to see Riker show up I didn't need to see that. It pissed me off. Pretty much everyone that I was talking to about it at the time, they were like, really? Riker was there? I don't have a problem with Jonathan Frakes. I like William Riker. But I do not like the fact that he was there. It was supposed to be about them. And the cast felt slighted by it. I don't blame them for that. The whole thing turned out to be a hologram simulation to help Riker learn how to command. I was beating my head against the ground on that one. But here we go. The NX-REFIT Columbia Subclass. Here we go. Certifiably Ingame. Thanks, Real Gamers MBR. Thank you for being a Patreon. Here we go.
Hello, Rick here again with a video looking into the history, capabilities and lore behind another canonised variety of starship, the NX-class refit, also known as the Columbia class. Now, the lore around its origins gets a little hazy, but in real life it was designed by Doug Drexler as a concept for further appearances of the titular vessel of the series Star Trek Enterprise. But that show ended before such a concept was introduced. Having said that, its introduction in beta canon is both relatively simple and messy depending on the sources. Let's get started.
Okay.
The Enterprise NX-01 was the first human vessel capable of Warp 5, and the conclusion to both the Warp 5 program, instituted by Zefram Cochrane in 2119, and the NX project in the 2140s. The vessel itself was a testbed for a bunch of technologies that Starfleet would pioneer into future ships, such as the phase cannons and polarised hull plating, as well as extensive sensor equipment. As the Earth's Starfleet's first deep space explorer, its progress was watched by billions with interest, and the situations it encountered taught Starfleet much more about what was needed out there among the stars. While overall satisfied with its scientific utility, it was the Xindi crisis of 2152 and 53 that first highlighted the need for greater firepower and defensive capabilities,
right,
as the NX had taken so much of a beating several times over its missions. So it was that plans were instigated to upgrade the NX design to a new model, capable of withstanding more and going further. This would take several more years, and in the meantime there were other NX-class vessels under construction, such as the Enterprise's sister ship, the NX-02 Columbia. Implementing large changes to the design was not practical at this stage, so the NX vessels were continued as they were, with fine-tuning, adjustments and upgrades where possible.
Okay.
It was during the mounting tension with the Romulan Star Empire that progress on this project really took off, as this led to the foundation of the Coalition of Planets in 2155 and a slightly more open sharing of technology between the member governments. But when the note-taking and research and development was eventually complete, the plans for the NX-REFIT project had begun, even as the remaining vessels of the line were being completed. Now, there's a little bit of confusion here, drawn from several apocryphal sources, between one source listing that the first vessel to be overhauled with the REFIT project was the Enterprise in 2156. But the sources I have read make no mention of this overhaul.
Okay.
What is mentioned is the vanishing of the NX-02 Columbia, something that would go down in history as one of Starfleet's greatest mysteries in 2156. The ship ends up being a pivotal factor in the Star Trek Destiny books, which has since been isolated into its own splinter timeline.
Okay.
So the canonicity of all this NX-REFIT stuff may be in question even among the Apocrypha as...
Yeah, once they started doing all the different timelines, it really started to really just jump all over the place. I did not like that in the slightest. Oh, the Kelvin timeline was a mistake.
As the technology within the overhauled NX ships contradicts the political landscape of the Coalition members during the Romulan War era. Nevertheless, the loss of the Columbia, its crew, and captain, who was a close personal friend to Captain Archer, led him to petition the REFIT NX to be referred to as the Columbia subclass starship. The general idea of the NX-REFIT was to attach an outboard module to the NX class, a secondary hull slung under the saucer section and connected via a neck with elongated nacelle pylons for integrity. This module was to contain a newer warp core system, which could cruise comfortably at warp 5, which still taxed the standard NX, but was capable of attaining 6.3 for around 8 hours before emergency shutdown. Other sources suggest that this was indeed a Warp 7 engine.
So I was wrong about this, and I can readily admit that. Here we go.
Based on the one that the Vulcans had designed decades earlier. This also necessitated the adjustment of the nacelles. The outboard module also contained a far larger and more powerful deflector dish to cope with higher warp speeds and enable the first Starfleet deflector shielding on a starship, something that was much needed in the race to catch up with the surrounding powers. The first vessel to receive this overhaul was apparently the Enterprise, in which it underwent a 180-day stay at the Fleet Yard space dock over Earth, receiving the upgrade. As part of the refit and a formalisation of the Coalition of Planets, the Enterprise was given the prefix of SS. Of course, the biggest hurdle in the notion that the Enterprise was the first to be upgraded in this fashion is the fact that when we see it in holographic form in the final episode, it is still the familiar original NX shape. So canonically, it was always this way until its retirement, and this will remain a concept ship design, perhaps only used on other vessels.
Right.
Unless the recording was a doctored Section 31 fabrication.
Probably was. In all likelihood, the final episode of Enterprise was so convoluted that it would not surprise me in the slightest. It really would not.
Over the following years, Starfleet would continue to produce its original NX-class starships if they were too far into development, calling them in at a later date to receive their Columbia-style modifications. But by 2162, only one original NX class was left, the Endeavour NX-06. From then on, every NX ship produced by Starfleet would be a Columbia-class vessel from scratch and included the Buran, Shenlong, Apollo, Soyuz, Ares, Charybdis, Phoenix, Valiant up until 2167. As you may note from the dates, This passes over the founding of the United Federation of Planets in 2161, when the powers that signed the coalition fully invested themselves into the mutual cooperation and development ideals. This is where the discrepancies in the source materials come up, as the books declare that direct exchanges of technology were not done until the Federation was formed. Such an act, even with allies, would break the Vulcans' non-interference policy.
Right.
It would make more sense for the NX-REFIT program to get underway when the UFP was founded, as there were fewer restrictions in the trade of technologies. But I guess I also don't see an issue with the Columbia class having its roots in the Romulan War era either.
I don't.
Either way, it's a pet peeve, but it might affect your interpretation of the law. Amid numerous other improvements, the Columbia class was outfitted from the start with higher yield phase cannons and photonic torpedoes, but also the testbed for phase banks instead.
Oh.
As noted, the major inclusions were the deflector shielding and newer warp drive, but these were not without their problems. The deflector shielding was derived from Andorian Imperial Guard designs and was robust for its time, but was incompatible with Starfleet tech. This gave the vessel a limit of warp 3 when its shields were raised, and the problems didn't stop there. The Vulcan-made tractor beam worked fine until you tried to use it through the Andorian shielding,
Lovely.
which threw off the targeting array. This was all part of a Warp 7 program that Starfleet had been starting up around 2155 and presumably is the technology that was folded into the Columbia class. In fact, it was Tobias Dax and his engineering team who had the monumental task of making sure all these pieces of equipment worked together, and by 2163 these issues had been ironed out, removing the technological limitations of the early NX-REFITs. In many ways, this encapsulated perfectly the uneasy formation of the Coalition and later Federation. The contributions of these founding powers often butted heads and had numerous issues with one another. While together they still produced something greater, it was not until they began to cooperate in earnest that the Columbia class, like the Federation itself, became greater than the sum of its parts. We have no word yet when the Columbia class was finally decommissioned. The SS Enterprise NX-01 was turned into a museum ship on the signing of the Federation Charter, but the Columbia would go on to serve the UFP Starfleet, with all vessels being rebranded with the now familiar USS and NCC registry. This vessel answers a lingering thought I had for ages, that was, why the shape? Ships like the Constitution class set the precedent for this iconic Federation silhouette, but why that particular shape? This stepping stone between NX and Constitution gives us that answer, and established the look for what constitutes a Starfleet design going forwards.
I always liked the way that the NX looked. I really always liked the way it looked. You could see the basic foundation there. It just wasn't complete yet, much like the rest of just like the Federation itself. The Federation itself was not quite there yet, and neither was this ship. So I liked that. I really did like the NX-01 as a concept.
Completely into the realms of non-canonical additions now, we also have the 2280s variant of the Columbia class, which is an overhaul of the Columbia design to fit with the newer Federation design style. But even in the source material, Star Trek Online, it calls it a concept vessel despite being able to fly it. The Columbia class, or NX-REFIT, remains one of my favourite ship looks for the missing link factor it has in Starfleet history, and I would have loved to have seen it on screen. Considering the level of appreciation this ship has, I'm apparently not alone. Of course, this is come about to the forefront due to the single model on the desk of a young Jean-Luc Picard from his childhood, but I'll take it as an opportunity to talk about one of my favourite ships. For more on the era when this ship would have been debuted, you can check out my early Starfleet series, which covers various aspects of the post-Enterprise Apocrypha. Until then, thank you for watching this video. I've been Rick, and I'll see you next time.
Nice.
Goodbye.
Okay. I was very happy with the way that the NX class looked when I first saw it. I was not thrilled at all about Scott Bakula. I've always viewed him as a little bit of an overactor. Well, not a little bit. He's Jim Carrey level overactor, but in a dramatic sense, in my opinion. But the rest of the cast was very, very solid, in my opinion. And I really, really enjoyed the show. I 100% enjoyed the show, even with Bakula there. Um, I still can't get over the way that ended. When I saw that, oh God, you want to talk about somebody that was pissed off. First, I wasn't really understanding why they were skipping so far into the future, and then all of a sudden, when I heard Jonathan Frakes chime in, I was like, you didn't do this to this show. Oh my God. In any case, that's enough out of me. That's more than enough out of me. This was the NX-REFIT. And personally, I liked the NX class. I never thought that it changed. I never really thought that it changed. I always wanted to see a Trek series set during the Earth-Romulan War. That's something I've always really, really wanted. And I don't want it to be New Trek. I don't like New Trek. I really don't. It's, let's be flashy, let's be all this other kind of stuff, and ignore everything that made Trek what it was. A brighter vision for humanity in the future. And more, we're leaning more towards 40K than Star Trek. Guys, I will catch you next time. All of oh my God, all of my links are going to be in the description down below. All of Certifiably Ingame's links are going to be there as well. So just be sure to check those out. And I'll catch you guys next time.